My heart pounded against my ribs like a caged animal as I stood at the altar in the Grand Cathedral. The sunlight sifted through the stained glass windows, painting shards of violet and gold across the polished marble floor. Every detail had been perfect, the ivory lace of my gown trailing behind me like a river of moonlight, the string quartet's haunting melody drifting through the nave, and the scent of white peonies that drifted on every breath. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, I felt the emptiness swell beneath my chest, a hollowness that echoed the vacant seats flanking the aisle. Beneath my calm facade, I was unraveling. I'd dreamed of this day since childhood, imagining the moment I would promise my life to Henry, his hand warm and steady in mine, our futures entwined. But Henry was here, waiting for me, and I was alone. My parents sat nearby, their expressions masked with concern. Friends who had RSVP'd months ago were nowhere to be seen. After the bridesmaids had walked, after the pastor had welcomed us, the guest remained absent. It felt as though I inhabited two worlds at once, one resplendent with expectation, and one barren and cold. I held my breath as the pastor cleared his throat. His voice was gentle, the words he spoke a soft echo of ritual. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Normally, this moment would bring a hush of reverence, a sense of collective joy. Instead, it was a vacuum of sound, save for the distant flutter of birds beyond the cathedral doors. My breath trembled, and for the first time, I realized I'd been smiling into a void. Henry's eyes searched mine. Confusion and hurt mingled in their depths. I thought back to last night, the final rehearsal dinner at my parents' estate, where laughter had chimed under the fairy lights. My sister, Lucienne, had toasted us with a glass of champagne, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Don't forget us in your happy new life," she'd teased, and I'd squeezed her hand. My best friend Marisol had draped an arm around my shoulders, whispering, "Tomorrow you'll be a queen." I'd believed them both, but maybe that was my mistake. Mistaking words for commitment. I glanced down the aisle, expecting at least one familiar face to appear, a late arrival. A rustling of fabric, a flash of color, but nothing. The swelling choral chord that should have signaled my entrance had faded, leaving silence in its wake. My reflection in the polished floor seemed otherworldly, a bride unaccompanied. Shame crept up my throat like bile. Was I unworthy of their presence, not beloved enough to warrant standing witness? Henry's fingers tightened around mine, and I looked up at him, his strong jaw set, vulnerability shining through. "Is everything all right?" he mouthed, silent. I shook my head, tears slipping free, hot and relentless. The pearls at my collar trembled in sympathy. I drew in a shuddering breath. "They've forgotten me," I whispered, though my voice carried to the very back of the cathedral. A single footstep sounded behind me. I turned, hope flaring, only to see Father Donnelly, his brow furrowed. "You may be seated, dear," he murmured, his gaze apologetic. "We'll reconvene when—" He couldn't finish. It was an unspoken betrayal. I sank into the pew beside Henry, the white cushioned seat a jarring contrast to the turmoil thrashing within me. My gown pooled around my legs, the embroidery glinting like tears on silk. The pastor murmured some final benediction about patience and love, but the words washed over me without meaning. Henry turned, brushing an errant lock of hair from my face. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be," I replied, my voice already steeling. "This is on them." At that moment, the cathedral doors swung open with a creak that echoed like a verdict. My chest clenched. My family, my friends, they had arrived, their silhouettes framed in the sunlight. Relief and fury warred inside me as they hurried down the aisle, lips parted in hurried apologies, faces flushed with embarrassment. My mother's pearl necklace bounced against her throat, my father's tie crooked, Lucienne clutching her phone as she filmed me, calling out, "I'm so sorry, Isabel." Isabel. My name, they remembered. Too late. I rose as one, my voice ringing clear in the hushed space. "Please stop," I said, and the mock festival of guilt sputtered to a halt. The guests froze mid-step. The string quartet's second violin drew a stuttering note before falling silent. I stepped forward, each footfall resolute. You've missed the point of this day. Love, commitment, family. You skipped my wedding. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle like snow. And you can't undo that with a late arrival. My mother's lips trembled. Sweetheart. Don't, I cut her off. I turned to my father. You taught me that family means showing up. You weren't here. My friends. I swept my gaze across the rows of empty seats to Lucienne and Marisol, lined up behind her. Wonder where my loyalty lies now. I think I've answered that already. Henry's hand gripped mine, a tether to reality. I took a deep, steady breath, feeling power surge through the hollow ache. Marriage means trust and respect, but it also means consequences. Tomorrow, the lawyer will send the revised will. Those of you absent today, you'll be absent from the inheritance as well. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Lucienne stepped forward, tears glistening. Isa, please. This isn't a joke, and I won't be made to feel small. Call off the ceremony. I faced the pastor. We're done here. Beneath my composed voice, my pulse thundered like war drums. One by one, the guests turned and fled, shame hastening their footsteps. My parents lingered, their sorrowful eyes begging forgiveness. But I felt an unbreakable calm settle over me, a realization that I was not the abandoned bride. I was the architect of my own destiny. I looked at Henry. His eyes were filled with awe and something beyond love. Admiration. He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. Are you all right? He asked. I nodded, a small smile lifting the corner of my lips. I've never been more certain of anything. We walked down the aisle together. No trumpets, no applauding guests, just us and the echo of our footsteps. The cathedral doors swung open into the late afternoon light. As we stepped outside, I felt the sun warm my face, and for the first time, I understood the true meaning of family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The morning after the shattered ceremony dawned with an eerie stillness. I awoke in the guest suite of the small inn Henry had booked for us, far away from the prying eyes of family and friends. The pale light seeping through the lace curtains painted stripes across the bedspread, mirroring the turmoil in my chest. Henry lay beside me, his arm draped across my waist, breathing easily as if untouched by the storm that had consumed last evening. I stared at his profile, strong, resolute, unwavering, and realized how precious this sanctuary was. My mind replayed each moment in the cathedral, the hollow ache as the last guest disappeared, the weight of betrayal when those I loved had failed me. But now, in this quiet room, I felt a swell of determination. This story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I slid out of bed and stepped onto the cool wooden floor. The door creaked open as Henry stirred, blinking sleep from his eyes. His gaze lit on me, concern and curiosity mingling. You look different, he said softly. I took a breath. I feel different. I moved to the window and gazed out at the dew-laden courtyard. Last night, I promised myself something. I will not let others define my worth. If they can choose to abandon me on the most sacred day of my life, they don't deserve a place in my future. Henry wrapped an arm around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. What will you do? I turned in his embrace, looking deep into his eyes. I will build a life that doesn't need them. I will protect our future and ensure that only those who've proven their loyalty share in our legacy. He nodded, a fierce pride burning in his gaze. Then let's start today. We dressed in simple clothes, a contrast to the finery of the day before, and stepped into the inn's parlor, where a fresh pot of coffee awaited. The innkeeper, a kindly woman with silver-streaked hair, offered us pastries. I realized I had not eaten since the rehearsal dinner, and accepted a croissant gratefully. We spoke in whispers about the arrangements. Henry had secured a small cottage near his family's estate in the English countryside. It was modest, with ivy crawling along the brick exterior and a thatched roof that seemed to belong in a storybook. He had arranged for our departure that afternoon, But first, there were matters of consequence to address. I drew my laptop from my satchel and logged into my secure client portal. As an estate lawyer, I had spent years managing the affairs of wealthy families, drafting wills, advising on trusts, and mediating disputes. Yet never had I imagined I would be applying those skills to my own life so soon. I accessed the final version of my parents' will, which named me as executor alongside Lucienne and Marisol. The original draft had been shared among the three of us equally. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my next move. I had to act swiftly. Any delay could give them time to contest or undo my revisions. With a steady breath, I created a revised codicil. I struck Lucienne's name entirely, reallocated her share to a charitable trust for underprivileged children, and reduced my mother's portion by half, detaching the rest to fund scholarships for aspiring artists, my mother's lifelong passion. Marisol's name remained, but only after she formally apologized in writing and pledged to actively support Henry and me. I had already received her teary email that morning, contrition dripping from every word. I hesitated a moment, then reserved her place. Her remorse seemed genuine. My father's share would pass entirely to me, under my sole stewardship, and in trust for any children I might bear. I saved the document and sent the draft to my private attorney in London, a stout woman named Dorothy Reynolds, whose signature carried weight in any court. Within moments, I had confirmation of receipt. The wheels were in motion. Henry poured me another cup of coffee. "Done?" he asked. I nodded, though a tremor of excitement ran through me. "Done." He took my hand across the table. "I'm proud of you, Isabel. This is how you fight back. You take control." I smiled, gratitude filling me. But beneath the triumph, doubt whispered. Would they contest it? Could they challenge my decisions? I chided myself. This was exactly why I had built my career on meticulous preparation. Just then, the door to the parlor swung open. A messenger stood there, a brass seal dangling from his hand. He bowed. "Miss Fairchild, a letter for you, sealed from your grandmother's council in Edinburgh." My grandmother, Eleanor Fairchild, had been the matriarch of our family, a formidable woman whose iron grip had shaped generations. She had passed 3 years ago, leaving behind vast estates across Scotland and England. The bulk of her fortune had been held in trusts, with the remainder divided among her descendants at her council's discretion. "Thank you," I said, taking the scroll. My heart quickened as I broke the seal. Henry watched, his fingers tightening around mine. I unrolled the parchment and scanned the elegant script. "My dearest Isabel, if you are reading this, know that I have watched you grow with pride and admiration. I feared that our family's legacy would fall to squabbling heirs, but I believed in your strength. This letter accompanies the final trust document, naming you sole beneficiary of my estate, on condition that you uphold the values of loyalty and compassion that define the Fairchild name. Should you diverge from these principles, the trust shall pass instead to the Eleanor Fairchild Scholarship Fund." Tears blurred my vision as I read. The only condition, upholding loyalty and compassion, felt like a validation of my choices. My grandmother had entrusted me with the family's future. I looked at Henry, my hands trembling. "She left everything to me." He drew me into his arms, his voice soft. "And you've already proven you're worthy." In that moment, I felt the weight of generations shift onto my shoulders. The cathedral's empty pews, the whispers of betrayal, they seemed distant now, eclipsed by the vast horizon of possibility before me. I was not defined by the absence of others, but by the presence of my own conviction. We rose from the table, determination blazing in our eyes. With my grandmother's legacy and Henry's unwavering support, we would forge a life beyond the confines of broken promises. The messenger cleared his throat once more. "Shall I deliver the original to your solicitor?" I nodded, "Yes, and please forward copies to Dorothy." As the messenger bowed and left, I turned to Henry. "Shall we begin our next chapter?" He smiled and, without a word, lifted me into his arms and carried me into the courtyard, where the afternoon sunlight danced on the dew-kissed grass. I laughed, a clear, radiant sound that carried away the last remnants of grief. Still, in the back of my mind, I knew the fight was far from over. The Fairchild name demanded vigilance. Grudges do not easily fade. But for now, I had won a crucial battle. And tomorrow, we would start anew, bound not by blood alone, but by choice, loyalty, and love. The cottage was nestled among rolling hills of emerald grass, framed by wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. Ivy clung to the stone walls, and the thatched roof sagged with comforting familiarity. Henry and I stepped onto the flagstone path, breathing in the scent of earth and promise. This humble refuge would be our sanctuary. While the world beyond brimmed with expectations and obligations, here we would build our future. Inside, the rooms were sunlit and welcoming. Plush sofas upholstered in muted florals, bookshelves laden with leather-bound volumes, and window seats that beckoned with plump cushions. A hearth at the center of the parlor promised crackling fires on crisp evenings. I ran my hand across the smooth oak mantel, picturing our portraits standing here years from now, children's laughter echoing through the halls. But dreams required foundations. First, there were the practicalities: legal filings, estate transfers, and securing our finances. Henry left by midday for his family office, promising to return at sunset with documents and signatures. Meanwhile, I busied myself in the study, where polished mahogany desks lined the walls. Sunbeams danced off the brass inkwells as I unpacked my laptop and legal binders. I reviewed the codicil once more, ensuring that every clause was airtight. The charitable trust details, the scholarship stipulations, each line had been scrutinized. Yet I knew that in the hushed corridors of power, lawyers would comb through minutiae, seeking any loophole. Preparation was my armor. The morning breeze carried the distant clip-clop of horses. Through the open window I heard hoofbeats and murmured conversation. Curious, I rose to look outside. Down the lane came a black carriage, its wheels thudding rhythmically on the gravel. The crest on its door, a golden falcon, unmistakably belonged to the Fairchild family. My pulse quickened. The carriage slowed in front of our gate, and a footman dismounted, extending a gloved hand to steady the carriage door. Out stepped my uncle, Julian Fairchild. Tall, impeccably dressed, his silver hair combed back like a crown. His dark eyes glinted with calculation as he strode toward me. "Isabel," he greeted, voice smooth as silk, yet with an undercurrent I recognized: challenge. I met him on the lawn, heels clicking on the flagstones. "Uncle Julian," I said coolly, "what brings you here?" He offered a courteous bow with a twist of irony. "News travels swiftly. I came to congratulate you on your new circumstances." I held his gaze. "Thank you." His presence was a reminder that blood ties can be as sharp as daggers. He glanced at the cottage before his eyes settled on the study window where my papers lay. "I trust you haven't made any rash decisions?" "My grandmother's estate is substantial. It must be managed wisely." I lifted my chin. "Her will is clear. I'm fulfilling her wishes." His lips curved in a faint smile. "Of course. But remember, Isabel, the Fairchild legacy is more than property and titles. It's about unity. It pains me to see divisions where there should be solidarity." I felt a flicker of anger but tempered it. Perhaps unity requires mutual respect. He nodded, that silk-smooth nod that hinted at deeper designs. "Indeed, I'll leave you to your new home. Should you require any assistance, legal or otherwise, know that I am at your disposal." He turned, the footman opening the carriage door behind him. As the horses trotted away, I exhaled. His visit was a warning, an unspoken test of my resolve. Inside, I returned to my desk. My fingers trembled over the keyboard as I drafted an email to Dorothy and our solicitor, summarizing Uncle Julian's appearance and ensuring that our filings would include a notice of any potential contests by him. For every move he made, I needed a counter-move ready. The afternoon sun dipped low when Henry returned, documents stacked in his arms. He spotted me at the window and smiled, tension easing from his shoulders. "Good news?" I closed my laptop. "We have a challenger." He set the papers down, brows knitting. "Julian?" "Yes. He was here less than an hour ago." Henry ran a hand through his hair. "He's always been the family diplomat. When he wants something, he asks. When he opposes, he warns." I nodded. I've already alerted our attorneys. But this means we'll need to be vigilant. He took my hand. Whatever comes, we face it together. I smiled. His faith in us was my fortress. Together. That evening, we dined by candlelight in the parlor, the firelight flickering across our faces. Our meal was simple: roast chicken, garden vegetables, and freshly baked bread, but tasted of comfort and shared purpose. We spoke of dreams for the cottage, transforming the loft into a library, planting roses by the front path, hosting friends for evenings of music and laughter. Yet beneath the warmth, I felt a chill. The notion of hosting friends. What if they too proved unfaithful? The memory of empty pews haunted me. I steeled myself. Only those who had stood by me, like Henry, deserved our trust. After dinner, Henry brewed chamomile tea. I stood by the hearth, gazing at the dancing flames, mind-whirring. The Fairchild crest, the legal battles, the expectations of society, they had all lost their power to intimidate me. My grandmother's words echoed, loyalty and compassion. These were my guiding stars. In the distance, a church bell tolled the hour. I smiled, imagining the resonance of beginning anew. The clock hands moved forward, as I would too. Henry placed a hand on my shoulder. Let's go to bed. Tomorrow we tackle the paperwork. Quote. I nodded, turning to him. Yes, and we plan our lives, not their expectations. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I felt the weight of 1,000 gazes lift from my shoulders. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I had uncovered a strength that would see me through. And so, with Henry by my side, I embraced the unknown, ready to write the next chapter in a story of my own making. The world outside the cottage walls might remain uncertain, but inside, I had carved out a sanctuary fueled by resolve and love, two allies stronger than any family bond. And as I slipped beneath the covers, sleep claimed me with the promise of tomorrow's dawn. I awoke to the scent of rain on the wind, the soft patter of droplets against the window pane lulling me from sleep. Morning light filtered through the cottage curtains, revealing a gray sky and lush garden gilded by moisture. I slipped from Henry's arms, careful not to wake him, and made my way downstairs. The study called to me. Today would be filled with due diligence, but the fresh air and quiet offered a moment to center myself. Outside, the courtyard lay glistening, cobblestones slick with rain. I wrapped myself in a shawl and stepped into that world of damp earth and flower petals. My grandmother's rose bushes, planted years ago, had burst into life after last night's downpour. Petals clung to the stems like jewels. I inhaled deeply, letting the fragrance calm the surge of determination simmering in my chest. Returning inside, I found Henry at the desk, papers strewn about, pen in hand. He looked up, eyes bright behind wire-rimmed glasses. Morning, he murmured, then smiled at my appearance. Cottage life suits you. I laughed softly. It suits me after everything. The morning was devoted to legal minutiae, reviewing estate tax filings, coordinating with the trust bank, and finalizing the house deed transfers to our joint names. Each signature, each notarized stamp, carved our claim into reality. Dorothy had handled most of the heavy lifting, but my presence lent weight to the proceedings. I signed documents titled Settlement of Eleanor Fairchild Trust and Joint Tenancy Deed, my name appearing alongside Henry's in elegant script. By midday, our work was done. Henry closed the last folder and stretched. Well? I exhaled, folding my hands. Everything is legal, binding, and on schedule. He nodded approvingly. Let's celebrate. I raised an eyebrow. How so? Quote. He tapped a small wooden box on the desk. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with intertwined initials, H and I. I traced the letters, emotion rising in my throat. Henry, it's beautiful. He smiled, sliding the chain around my neck. You've earned it, for your strength, your vision, and for standing up to those who doubt you. Tears pricked at my eyes. I leaned forward and kissed him, gratitude and love mingling in that moment. Thank you. He took my hand. Meet me in the courtyard in an hour. I have plans. Curiosity bloomed as I dressed in a simple, flowing dress. The rain had stopped, and the clouds parted to reveal a pale sun. I descended to the courtyard to find Henry waiting beside a canvas easel. Naked trees framed a wooden table laid with paints, brushes, and a fresh canvas. He grinned. "This cottage deserves our personal touch. Would you paint with me?" My surprise turned to delight. "I haven't painted since I was a girl." He held up a brush. "Well, today's for rediscovery." We sat side by side, brushes in hand, and with cautious strokes began to paint the scene before us. The ivy-clad walls, the rose bushes, and the distant hills. Colors blended, perspectives shifted, and laughter punctuated our silence whenever a misplaced stroke sent splatters of paint flying. I felt childlike joy bubble within me, a sense of creativity unburdened by contracts and clauses. As the afternoon unfolded, our painting grew, a portrait of home, capturing its warmth and promise. I mixed lavender for the sky and olive for the leaves. Henry's strokes brought depth to the shadows of the walls. Together, we crafted a vision of our life in that cottage, imperfections and all. When the canvas was filled, we stood back, admiration on his face. "It's perfect," he said. I studied our work, pride and affection swelling. "It's ours." He reached for my hand. "Let's hang it above the hearth, a reminder of our journey and our partnership." I nodded, my heart full. Yes. Later that evening, as the fire crackled, we sat before the painting, wrapped in a woolen throw. Outside, the moon rose, casting silver light through the window. We sipped hot tea and spoke of our dreams, a family, travel to my grandmother's beloved Scotland, and building a home rooted in love. But amidst the warmth, a sliver of concern lingered. The legal world could be as unpredictable as weather. Challenges might arise when least expected. I pressed my hand to Henry's. "Whatever comes, I won't face it alone." He kissed my knuckles. "Nor will I." As the fire died to embers, I allowed myself to lean into hope. The Fairchild legacy was more than land and titles. It was the stories we wrote with each choice. And ours was still unfolding. Frame by frame, brushstroke by brushstroke. Dawn light filtered through the cottage windows, painting the walls in pale gold. Henry was already awake, seated at the breakfast table, pouring silver-dollar pancakes onto our plates. The sweet aroma of maple syrup and sizzling batter promised a good start to the day. I slipped into my chair, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear and smiling at him. His presence was the first comfort I sought each morning. As we ate, Henry unfolded the day's agenda. I arranged a meeting with the local bank manager at 10. He'll finalize the trust transfers. After that, I thought we could visit the village market. I nodded, spooning fluffy pancake onto my plate. Sounds perfect. But beneath the domestic bliss, the echo of a ticking clock reminded me of the looming legal battles. I glanced at the stack of correspondence by my plate, letters from distant relatives, colleagues, and the occasional terse note from Julian's legal team. The first missive was brief. "We must discuss the inheritance adjustments before they are finalized. Urgent. J." I smiled wryly. Julian's style was direct. The second was more surprising. An invitation from Marisol. She wrote, "Dear Isabel, I owe you more than apologies. Will you meet me for tea? I want to make amends. Love, M." I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. Marisol had been my dearest friend since childhood. When she failed to show at the wedding, I'd felt a sting deeper than betrayal, like a wound. But her note carried sincerity. Henry noticed my hesitation. "Everything all right?" I handed him the letters. "Julian's on the warpath, and Marisol wants tea." He chuckled softly. "2 invitations, one from an enemy, one from a friend seeking redemption." He studied my face. "What do you want to do?" I folded my napkin, resolve growing. "I'll hear Marisol out. As for Julian, we move forward and stay vigilant." He nodded in approval. "Then let's finish breakfast and get going." The market was a riot of colors and sounds. Stalls overflowed with fresh produce, berries bright as jewels, crates of wild mushrooms, wheels of cheese stacked like towers. Artisans displayed hand-woven baskets and pottery, each piece unique. The air buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the occasional bark of a haggling customer. Marisol was waiting at a small tea room on the market square, her back to me. She wore a pale blue dress and held a parasol, her golden hair tied in a loose bun. When she turned, surprise and relief dawned on her face. "Isabel," she exclaimed, setting the parasol beside her chair. She rose and embraced me. Her perfume, lilac and sandalwood, was comforting and familiar. I smiled, warmth nudging the coolness of distrust. "Marisol." We sat, teacups steaming between us. She poured first, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry for not being there. I got caught up in family drama. My sister was ill, and I was needed at home, but I should have told you." I studied her. Her eyes held genuine remorse. "I understand emergencies happen, but you left me feeling abandoned. It hurt more than I can say." Tears glistened on her lashes. "I know. I was selfish, and I take full responsibility. I came today because I don't want to lose you. You're my best friend." I sighed, stirring my tea. "I want to believe you, but I need to see actions, not just hear words." Her gaze was fierce with determination. "I will prove myself, whatever it takes." I nodded. "Start by supporting us moving forward. Be present. Stand by me when others falter." Her smile was bright. "I will." We sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea and watching the bustle of the market. For the first time since the wedding, I felt the soothing balm of reconciliation. After our meeting, Henry and I strolled through the stalls, Marisol joining us. We sampled cheeses, purchased jars of honey, and chatted about village gossip. The sun shone down, warming our backs. At the bank, the manager, a stout woman named Mrs. Haversham, greeted us with a firm handshake. She had processed my grandmother's trusts for decades. We signed the final documents, transferred funds, and sealed the arrangements. "Congratulations, Miss Fairchild and Mr. Montgomery," she said. "The trusts are secure." I shook her hand, relief flooding me. "Thank you, Mrs. Haversham." As we left the bank, Henry slipped an arm around me. One more step completed. I leaned into him, the weight of obligations lightened. "Yes." Back at the cottage that evening, Marisol stayed for dinner. We dined under the lantern-lit patio, laughter and conversation weaving between us. The ache of betrayal eased as genuine friendship rekindled. Midway through the meal, Marisol raised her glass. "To new beginnings, and to friends who stand by each other." I clinked my glass against hers. "To loyalty." As I looked around the table, at Henry, at Marisol, at the cottage walls adorned with memories, I felt a deep sense of belonging. Despite the whispers of contention, I had built a circle of trust. And though Julian might still challenge me, I knew that the alliances I chose would define my future more than any inheritance. In the distance, an owl hooted from the woods beyond the garden. Night embraced the cottage, and I felt a comforting hush. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The dawn mist clung to the rolling fields as I stepped onto the cottage's veranda, fresh kettle in hand. The air was cool and smelled of earth and lavender, each breath a reminder of the life Henry and I were building. We had weathered storms of betrayal and legal challenges, yet our bond remained unbroken. As I set the steaming cup of tea before him, Henry emerged from the cottage, clad in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers, the very image of quiet confidence. "Good morning," he said, his voice as soothing as the sunrise. "Good morning," I replied, smiling and seating myself at the small wrought iron table. The world felt poised on the edge of change, and I was eager to seize the day. Over breakfast, we discussed the letter Julian had sent the night before, a thinly veiled demand that I reverse the codicil or face legal action. It was a delicate situation. I needed to decide whether to engage him directly or let Dorothy handle it entirely. I listened as Henry weighed in, his strategic mind assessing the risks and benefits. "You should stand firm," he advised, breaking a fresh croissant. "Any concession will be seen as weakness." "I know," I said, stirring my tea, "but an all-out legal battle could drag on and drain resources." He leaned forward, his gaze intent. "Perhaps we start with a formal mediation. It allows us to show goodwill while maintaining our position. If he refuses to even meet, we gain moral high ground." I nodded thoughtfully. "Set it up. I'll prepare my statement." By mid-morning, Hunter and Reynolds LLP, my grandmother's longtime counsel, had coordinated a meeting with Julian's legal team at the estate's London offices. I dressed in a tailored navy suit, my hair pinned into a low chignon, projecting authority and grace in equal measure. Henry escorted me to the village carriage, and as we traveled along winding lanes toward the nearest station, I steadied nerves with deep breaths. The train rocked gently, and I gazed out at the verdant countryside, each field a patchwork of ambition and toil. Henry slid a file across the seat toward me. Our talking points, case summaries, and media statements should things go public. He squeezed my hand. "You're ready for this." Arriving at King's Cross, we hailed a carriage to the prestigious Mayfair quarters where the law firm's offices were located. The marble lobby gleamed under crystal chandeliers as we signed in. A junior associate led us through oak-paneled hallways lined with ancestral paintings until we reached the conference room, a grand chamber with tall windows overlooking Hyde Park. Julian sat at the far end of the mahogany table, flanked by two solicitors. He looked up, expression neutral. He rose and extended his hand, which I shook with measured firmness. "Isabel," he greeted, his tone cordial but guarded. "Uncle Julian," I replied, taking my seat. Henry stood behind me, silent support. Our mediator, a retired High Court judge, called the meeting to order, outlining the purpose, to discuss my grandmother's codicil and attempt a resolution without formal litigation. I began by presenting my grandmother's wishes, loyalty and compassion as conditions, and how the actions of certain family members contradicted that spirit. I spoke firmly, unemotionally, stating facts, missed weddings, severed communications, and the financial reallocations made in accordance with her directives. I concluded by expressing willingness to discuss modifications if genuine remorse and restitution were offered. Julian's solicitor rose. He recounted the family's perspective, Julian's efforts to maintain cohesion, his financial contributions to estate upkeep, and how his leadership role had been overlooked. He requested partial reinstatement of his share, citing his grandmother's verbal affirmations before her passing. My pulse quickened. I turned to Julian. "I was not present, but the will's text is unequivocal. If you had concerns, you could have raised them when the codicil was drafted." Julian's jaw tightened. "The codicil was hastily circulated, no proper family consultation." The mediator intervened, encouraging both sides to consider a fair compromise. Over the next hours, we negotiated. Julian's potential reinvestment in the charitable trust, a symbolic resignation of voting rights on family council, and a private apology to Marisol and me for any personal slights. By late afternoon, a tentative agreement was reached. Julian would relinquish his share but make an annual donation to the Eleanor Fairchild Scholarship Fund and attend a formal family reconciliation dinner at the estate next month. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue litigation, and his status within the Trust's advisory committee would be honorary only. As handshakes sealed the accord, I felt both relief and a surge of triumph. The Fairchild legacy would endure, tempered by accountability and renewed bonds. Back at the cottage that evening, Henry toasted our victory with a bottle of fine port. I looked at him across the candle-lit table, gratitude and love shining in my eyes. "We did it." He smiled, lifting his glass. "To unity through strength." I echoed the toast, heart swollen. The road had been rocky, but we had steered it toward hope. And as the fire crackled, I allowed myself to savor the moment before the next chapter beckoned, one shaped by choice, integrity, and the unbreakable ties of family and love. The soft glow of lanterns illuminated the parlor as autumn leaves drifted past the windows. Henry and I sat near the fireplace, poring over our plans for the coming months, crafting a family reconciliation dinner, organizing the scholarship fund disbursements, and mapping out renovations to the estate's west wing. The tension of negotiations had eased, but new responsibilities beckoned. A knock at the door interrupted our discussion. Henry opened it to reveal a courier holding a leather satchel. I took it, noting the bishop's crest stamped on the seal. Inside lay a letter from the Bishop of St. Aldrich's inviting us to a charity gala in the city, a chance to unveil the Eleanor Fairchild Scholarship Fund to prominent patrons and donors. "It's an excellent opportunity," Henry said, reading over my shoulder. "We can honor your grandmother's legacy and secure funding." I nodded, excitement stirring. Let's prepare a speech. Over the following week, we worked tirelessly. Henry handled logistics, booking accommodations, arranging transport, and coordinating with event planners. I drafted the speech, weaving anecdotes of my grandmother's passion for the arts, with tales of scholarship recipients whose lives had been transformed. On the eve of the gala, I stood before the mirror in a deep emerald gown, velvet hugging my silhouette, the color reminding me of our cottage's rolling hills. Henry appeared at my side in a tailored tuxedo, admiration in his eyes. "You look stunning," he whispered, adjusting the lapel of his jacket. I smiled, a flicker of nerves beneath my composure. "Thank you." When the carriage arrived, we stepped into the glossy world of the city, gas lamps casting amber pools on cobblestones. Inside the grand hall, chandeliers dripped crystal tears, and guests in opulent attire mingled, champagne flutes tinkling. As we approached the stage, the bishop greeted us warmly. "Miss Fairchild, Mr. Montgomery, your presence honors us." I took the podium, heart racing as murmurs hushed. The hush deepened as I cleared my throat. "Good evening, Your Grace, distinguished guests," I began. "Tonight we celebrate not only the generosity of patrons, but the timeless power of education. My grandmother, Eleanor Fairchild, believed that every child, regardless of circumstance, deserves the chance to cultivate their gifts. It is in her memory that we launched this scholarship fund, dedicated to nurturing the artists, musicians, and dreamers among us. I recounted stories of scholarship winners, a violinist who found her voice, a painter whose canvases told untold stories, and a playwright whose words bridged divides. With each anecdote, applause swelled. As I concluded, I held up a crystal plaque inscribed with the fund's name. "On behalf of the Fairchild family, I invite you to join us in lighting a path for future generations. Thank you." The hall erupted in applause, and as I stepped down, donors approached, pledging support. Henry gripped my hand, pride shining in his gaze. After the gala, we dined privately with the bishop and key benefactors. The night air was crisp as we made our way back to the carriage. I leaned against Henry, contentment warming me. Back at the cottage, we settled by the hearth. Henry poured a final glass of wine. "You were magnificent," he said, raising his glass to me. I clinked glasses. "To a legacy renewed." Outside, the wind rustled the last of the autumn leaves. Inside, the fire crackled with promise. And as I sipped my wine, I knew that each step, however challenging, led me closer to the life I chose. One of purpose, love, and unwavering loyalty. The crisp winter wind whipped around the cottage as I gazed out at the snow-dusted hills. Smoke spiraled from the chimney, carrying the promise of warmth inside. Snowflakes drifted like silent dancers, coating the ivy with frost. I wrapped my hands around a mug of cocoa, letting its heat seep into my bones. Inside, a roaring fire crackled, and Henry moved about the parlor, hanging wreaths of holly and pine in preparation for the family reconciliation dinner. We had set the date for early December, just a fortnight away. Invitations had been sent. Julian, Marisol, and the rest of the extended family. The servants buzzed with anticipation, polishing silver and laying out fine china. I oversaw the seating arrangements, ensuring every detail reflected both tradition and the new direction I sought for our family. In the morning, I ventured into the study to refine my toast. The Will's codicil, the gala's success, and Julian's mediated concessions, they all formed part of the tapestry I would present. Family unity would be the theme, and I would extend olive branches to those who had wronged me, demonstrating that compassion was my guiding principle. Henry joined me, sliding a sheaf of letters across the desk. "Look at these RSVPs," he said, pointing to the list. Most had accepted. Even Julian had confirmed, though with his own notation, "Will attend under protest." His signature was as stiff as his posture in the cathedral. I sighed. "He'll be here. That's what matters." He kissed my temple. "You're doing the right thing." The next days passed in a flurry of activity. The cook perfected roast venison and winter root vegetables, the florist arranged centerpieces of white roses and pine cones, and the seamstress tailored evening gowns for the staff. Every moment brimmed with purpose. On the eve of the dinner, snow fell steadily, blanketing the gardens in pristine white. I donned a deep burgundy gown and a silver brooch, my grandmother's, pinning it at my throat. Henry looked dashing in his midnight blue overcoat. The carriage ride to the estate was silent but comforting, the click of hooves echoing amid the white fields. We descended the steps into the grand hall, where candles shimmered against stone walls. A fire roared in the hearth, and the long oak table gleamed under flickering chandeliers. Guests arrived, scarves dusted with snow. Lucienne was first, her expression guarded but polite. She curtsied. "You look lovely, Isabelle," she said, voice soft. "Thank you, Lucienne. I'm glad you're here." Marisol appeared next, herself radiant, and embraced me warmly. I felt her sincerity. One by one, cousins, aunts, and uncles entered, exchanging greetings with polite smiles. Finally, Julien strode in, his posture erect. I approached him, extending my hand. "Thank you for coming, Uncle Julien," I said. He shook my hand, his grip firm, but less cold. "Thank you for inviting me." We took our places, and the cook served the feast. Conversation flowed, cautious at first, then more relaxed as laughter rippled through the hall. I raised my glass to call for attention. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," I began, my voice steady. "This evening marks a new chapter. We have faced hurt and misunderstandings, but beneath our disagreements lies a shared history of love. My grandmother believed that families are bound not by perfection, but by enduring commitment to one another. I spoke of forgiveness, of the strength it takes to forgive, and of the promise of futures built on honesty and respect. My words wove a narrative of unity. I looked around the table, pausing on Julien's face. There was a flicker of emotion in his eyes. As my toast concluded, the hall warmed with applause. Julien stood and raised his glass. "To Isabelle, may her wisdom guide us all." I smiled, gratitude shining. "To family." After dinner, we moved to the drawing room for coffee and brandy. Julien lingered by the fire as others chatted. I joined him. "Your speech was moving," he said finally. "I admit, I underestimated you." "Thank you," I replied. "I didn't want victory at the cost of estrangement. I want us all to be a family again." He stared into the flames. I was hurt by feeling excluded, but seeing the charity's impact, the scholarship's recipients, and tonight's warmth. "I see your vision." I laid a hand on his arm. "I forgive your doubts, and I hope we can move forward together, just as the codicil intended." He nodded, a rare vulnerability on his face. "I would like that." The snow continued to fall outside as we stood by the fire, 2 generations united in a fragile but hopeful truce. Beyond the grand hall's doors lay fields of white, silent and unspoiled, like family relationships reborn. I allowed myself to savor the moment, knowing that challenges might still arise, but certain that compassion and strength would guide us through. The first sign of spring emerged in fragile shoots of green pushing through the thawing earth surrounding the estate. Each morning, I stepped onto the veranda and watched a robin flit among the branches, heralding renewal. The crisp winter had given way to gentle rays of sun, and life returned in birdsong and blossoms. Our cottage, once cocooned in snow, now burst with daffodils nodding in the breeze. Henry and I sat at our breakfast table, the windows flung open to let in the fresh air. Over a modest meal of poached eggs and asparagus, we reviewed the latest reports on the scholarship fund's applications. The first round of candidates had been narrowed down, and a group of promising young artists awaited our final review. The responsibility weighed on me. Our grandmother's legacy hinged on selecting those most deserving. Among the finalists was a young painter, Amina Patel, whose canvases captured the resilience of her community in vibrant hues. Another was Luca Moreau, a pianist whose delicate fingers coaxed melodies from old ivory keys. And there was Marisol's recommendation, Clara Thompson, a writer whose stories gave voice to the marginalized. Each applicant carried a story that humbled me. We spent the morning listening to submitted recordings and studying portfolios. I marveled at the depth of their talent and the urgency of their dreams. When the debates grew heated, I favoring Amina's bold vision, Henry leaning toward Luca's musical genius, I learned that partnership meant compromise and trust. We ultimately agreed on a slate of 10 scholars, whose potential glittered like dewdrops. Having completed our decision, we prepared to visit the newly restored West Wing of the Fairchild Estate, where the inaugural scholarship awards would be presented. Dust motes danced in the arched windows as we walked through corridors lined with ancestral portraits. The renovation, spearheaded by my directives, had transformed once dilapidated rooms into studios and rehearsal halls for our scholars. A sense of pride swelled within me. The walls themselves seemed to hum with possibility. That afternoon, scholars and their families gathered in the resplendent hall, greeted by banners bearing the Eleanor Fairchild crest. I stood at the podium, Henry at my side, as the first plaques were awarded. Tears glistened in Amina's eyes as she cradled her award, promising to honor your faith in me. Luca's mother clasped my hand, gratitude palpable in her embrace. Clara gave a quiet nod, her voice catching as she read a few lines from her manuscript, her words weaving tapestries of hope. When the ceremony concluded, a gentle hush settled. Guests mingled in the courtyard, cherry blossoms drifting around them like pink snow. I slipped away with Henry to a secluded balcony overlooking the gardens. He kissed my temple. "You've changed so many lives," he said. I leaned into him, warmth flooding my chest. "And they've changed mine." But beneath the celebration, a new letter awaited my attention, an unsigned envelope bearing a press watermark, hinting at potential scrutiny. Inside was a reporter's request for comment on rumored nepotism within the fund's selection process. The unspoken accusation stung. Had my privilege overshadowed merit? I crumpled the letter, frustration rising. Henry steadied my hand. "We know the process was fair. Let's invite the press to observe next year's audits." I nodded, resolve stealing. Transparency would be our shield. As twilight deepened and the lanterns flickered to life, we returned to the cottage, determined to guard the integrity of our grandmother's legacy. Enter the next season, and with it, fresh challenges. Unwavering scrutiny, family dynamics evolving as Julian asserted his views on estate management, and the ever-shifting balance between duty and desire. But through every trial, my convictions held firm. I would protect this inheritance, not as a weapon of retribution, but as a beacon of hope, loyalty, and compassion for all who sought to follow their dreams under the Fairchild name. Summer arrived in a burst of golden light, and the gardens surrounding our cottage bloomed riotously. Roses climbed trellises in perfumed cascades, and lavender fields shimmered like amethyst under the sun. I stepped into the morning warmth, inhaling deeply, marveling at the life we'd nurtured, both in these gardens and through the scholarship fund. Henry and I sat on the terrace, planning a garden party to raise additional funds for the next round of scholars. Invitations had to reflect our vision, an elegant event celebrating creativity with art displays, musical performances, and readings. The air would hum with inspiration beneath festooned lanterns. We discussed guest lists, donors who'd pledged, prospective patrons, and family members, especially those whose support had wavered. I wanted Lucienne and Marisol both prominently involved. Their presence symbolized the bonds that had been rebuilt. Henry pointed to a folded letter on the table. I heard from the press again. Some are interested in investigating the reconciliation dinner. They imply the event was staged for optics. I frowned. They'll never be satisfied. But if they want photos and interviews, let them come. We've nothing to hide. As I drafted press releases, a faint pang surfaced. The fatigue of constant vigilance. But Henry's steady presence reminded me that transparency and authenticity would carry us through. That afternoon, I met with the parish priest at St. Aldrich's. Together, we chose a date for the garden party and approved the church grounds for the reception. Father Sullivan offered a small prayer for guidance, his words resonating: stewardship, generosity, and trust. Back at the cottage, I took a rare moment of quiet reflection in the library, where volumes of family history lined the shelves. My grandmother's portrait hung above the hearth, her gaze seeming to smile down in approval. I traced the contours of her face, imagining the trials she'd faced to maintain the family's estate. She had been a fortress. I had become a bridge. Evening fell with a violet hush. Henry prepared dinner, a simple feast of grilled fish and summer vegetables. We dined on the veranda, the cicadas chorusing around us. As we ate, the distant hum of lawnmowers signaled preparations in the gardens. After dinner, we wandered among the blooms. Lanterns cast pools of light on paths lined with hostas and sage. I slipped my hand into Henry's. "This feels like home." He smiled. "It is." I looked at the beauty surrounding us, the result of love, labor, and shared dreams. I thought of the challenges ahead: press scrutiny, Julian's cautious support, the weight of expectation. But I also felt the warmth of purpose. That night, as I lay beside Henry, I whispered, "Thank you for everything." He kissed my forehead. "Thank you for leading us." Sleep carried me beneath a canopy of dreams. Dreams of futures shaped by compassion and integrity, a legacy not of rejection, but of inclusion, where every bloom bore trace of loyalty. Late summer evenings held a golden haze, and I found myself drawn to the garden's reflection pool, where ripples bore the sky's pastel hues. Henry joined me, carrying a tray with iced tea. We settled onto a bench carved in oak, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. "I've been thinking," I began, lifting my glass, "about the next phase, expanding the scholarship program internationally." His eyes brightened. "You mean scholarships in the U.S.? Europe?" I nodded, tracing the rim. "Yes, Eleanor Fairchild had roots across both continents. We could honor that by inviting students worldwide." The idea bloomed in my mind, each possibility more exhilarating than the last. Henry sipped his tea thoughtfully. "We'll need partners, universities, galleries, sponsors, and a plan for logistics, visas, housing, mentorship." I smiled at his strategic focus. "I've already drafted a proposal for the Fairchild International Fellowship. We can present it at the next donor meeting." He squeezed my hand. "I'll support you every step." The breadth of ambition brought a thrill, tempered by the gravity of responsibility. I gazed at the distant hills, horizons awaiting discovery. Days later, the donors convened in the Mayfair drawing room, their refined voices echoing off silk wallpaper. I laid out my vision, each slide of my presentation meticulously designed. The response was enthusiastic. Pledges flowed, and within weeks, the Fairchild International Fellowship was born on paper. Returning to the cottage, Henry surprised me with news. Marisol had arranged a meeting with a former student she mentored, an aspiring sculptor from London who had struggled to find studio space. He offered to convert part of an old warehouse into a communal workshop for our residents. I embraced Marisol in gratitude. "You're not just atoning, you're leading," I whispered to her. She smiled, tears glinting. "Thank you for believing in me." With the workshop set up and first fellowship applications opening, I felt the pace quicken. Each morning, I awoke to emails from prospective students across time zones. The world seemed to lean in, beckoning. But ambition carried risk. Rumors surfaced of rival foundations questioning our authenticity, and Julian expressed concerns about financial oversight. Over dinner one evening, he broached the subject with cautious diplomacy. "My dear Isabel," he began, placing a hand over mine, "this international expansion is commendable, but ensure we maintain rigorous audits. Reputation is delicate." I met his gaze. "Agreed. I've already engaged Thompson & Vale for quarterly reports. Transparency will be our hallmark." He nodded, satisfaction warming his features. "Then you have my unwavering support." Under the harvest moon, surrounded by laughter and lantern light, I felt the full arc of my journey, from abandoned bride to architect of a global fellowship. The inheritance I had protected was more than money. It was a vessel for dreams. As summer waned, the first fellowship recipients would arrive on our doorstep, luggage in hand and hope in their eyes. I anticipated their arrival with wonder, ready to welcome them into the legacy my grandmother entrusted me to preserve. And so, standing by the reflection pool, I whispered into the night sky, "Welcome to the Fairchild family." Autumn's chill brought a tapestry of amber leaves to the Stanford estate as the first Fairchild International Fellows arrived. I stood at the carriage gate, nerves fluttering through me like a storm. Henry appeared beside me, offering tea and reassurance. "You're ready," he said. I inhaled, straightened my coat, and watched the carriage door open. One by one, they stepped onto the cobblestones. Asha Singh from Mumbai with a portfolio of delicate sketches. Miguel Santos from Sao Paulo cradling a violin case. Yelena Petrova from Moscow, fierce and quiet, carrying a satchel of manuscripts. Amira Al-Hadi from Cairo, holding clay samples for sculpting. Their eyes shone with hope and uncertainty. I greeted each by name, our grandmother's legacy emblazoned in my greeting, "Welcome to Fairchild Fellowship." They exchanged smiles, and in that moment, the walls of the estate seemed to breathe with promise. We toured the workshop that Marisol had arranged, where the hum of creation filled the air. Asha's pencil darted across a canvas. Miguel coaxed notes from a gleaming violin. Yelena read passages to an enraptured group. Amira felt the clay sculpting shapes that echoed her heritage. Tears pricked my eyes as I witnessed the legacy unfolding. I exchanged a glance with Henry. This was the future I'd fought for. Later, we dined in the great hall, the long tables set with candles and local harvest vegetables. Toasts were raised by scholars and staff alike to new beginnings, crossed borders, and unwavering support. I spoke last. My grandmother believed in the power of art to unite us beyond boundaries. You are the embodiment of that vision. Together, we forge a path where creativity knows no borders. Applause echoed off stone walls as I stepped down. The scholars rushed to introduce themselves, and I spent the evening listening to their dreams. After the festivities, Henry and I returned to our cottage, walking under a canopy of stars. He slipped his hand into mine. "You've built something incredible, Isabel." I leaned on his shoulder. "It's just the beginning." As moonlight danced on the hills, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The Fairchild inheritance had become more than wealth. It had become a beacon of hope, connecting artists across the globe. And I knew that with each challenge, our compassion and conviction would guide the way. Tomorrow, I would return to the city for donor meetings. But tonight, I would rest in the knowledge that I had honored my grandmother and myself in the most profound way. The bustle of London greeted me as I stepped off the train at Paddington, the city's pulse, a stark contrast to the tranquil countryside. Henry had returned to the cottage with the fellows for a retreat weekend, leaving me to manage donor relations in the city. The air was crisp with expectation as I hailed a cab to the Fairchild office in Mayfair. Today's agenda: secure corporate sponsorships for the fellowship, and pitch the long-term vision of an international arts symposium. The firm's reception desk buzzed with activity. I passed through the mahogany doors of the conference suite, where representatives from major cultural foundations awaited. My tailored suit and poised demeanor felt familiar now. This was the arena I'd once only known through contracts and legalese, but now I wielded purpose alongside privilege. I began with a stirring presentation, blending data and heart, metrics of scholarship success, graduation rates, exhibitions mounted, community impact, and the human stories behind the figures. I paused at images of Asha's vibrant murals and Miguel's poignant compositions, letting their art speak. The room was silent, eyes fixed. As the Q&A unfolded, inquiries ranged from budget allocations to governance structures. I answered each with clarity, unwavering confidence. By afternoon, 3 major sponsors had pledged multi-year commitments, with one offering an endowment in excess of £500,000. Their executives gathered around the table, shaking hands and promising to expand their involvement. Leaving the office, I felt a rush of triumph. The fellowship's financial foundations were secured for years to come. Yet, amid the success, a text from Henry awaited. "Family dinner tonight? They're eager to meet you." A flicker of apprehension passed through me. There were whispers of discord when family gatherings included the international fellows, some viewing them as distractions. That evening, I returned to the cottage, greeting the scholars who filled the parlor. They glowed with excitement at their retreat, sharing tales of collaboration and camaraderie. Amina Patel's mural plans for the village hall, Miguel's impromptu concert in the drawing room, and Yelena's readings beneath the rose arbor. It was a tapestry of creativity. The family arrived, Lucienne, her daughter Isabel in tow, Marisol, radiant in support, and Julian, who nodded politely at the fellows. Over a hearty stew and rustic bread, conversation unfurled. Julian raised his cup. "To the fellowship and its founder," he said, his tone warmer than before. I smiled, lifting my glass. To art in all its forms. Marisol beamed, and the scholars clinked their glasses in celebration. Later, as the group dispersed, Julian lingered. "You've done remarkably well," he said quietly. "I had my doubts, but tonight, I see you've honored grandmother's vision and surpassed it." I felt a swell of emotion. "Thank you, that means more than you know." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Shall we call Father Sullivan to bless this fellowship? A formal ceremony at the cathedral would cement its place in Fairchild history." I nodded, heart warmed by his proposal. "Let's do it." Under the star-drenched sky, standing among art, family, and future leaders, I realized that each step, even the hardest ones, had led here. The inheritance I had once used as a shield had become a platform for creation, unity, and boundless possibility. Tomorrow, the cathedral bells would ring once more, not for a wedding, but for a dedication, an affirmation that loyalty, compassion, and vision could redefine legacy itself. Morning light filtered through the Gothic arches of St. Aldrich's Cathedral, illuminating stained glass windows in kaleidoscopes of ruby, sapphire, and emerald. Today's ceremony was more than ritual. It was a testament to the power of vision rooted in compassion. I stood at the stone entrance, heart fluttering, as Henry straightened his tie and offered a reassuring smile. Behind us, the first cohort of Fairchild International Fellows followed in clusters, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Father Sullivan greeted us at the nave's threshold, his robes draped like river currents, and his eyes held a gentle wisdom. "Welcome, Isabel, Henry, and friends," he intoned. "Today we dedicate this fellowship to the glory of creation and the service of humanity." His voice resonated through the hush. We processed to the front pews. Julian, Lucienne, and Marisol took their seats, joined by local dignitaries and donors. The atmosphere was reverent yet buoyant, like the hush before a symphony's opening note. The choir rose in harmony, voices soaring in a hymn of gratitude. I recalled my wedding day, that hollow echo of absence. This moment was its mirror opposite, an affirmation of presence, of gathering in support rather than abandonment. Father Sullivan stepped to the lectern. "Let us pray." His words filled the silk-draped cathedral, prayers for wisdom, guidance, and unity. Then, he extended his hands over our fellowship banner, crimson velvet bearing a golden eagle poised mid-flight. "By the power vested in me, I dedicate the Fairchild International Fellowship. May it soar on wings of art and love." Light cascaded through the windows, hallowing the banner as the congregation erupted in applause. The fellows rose, faces alight with pride. Asha's eyes glistened. Miguel bowed his head in silent thanks. Yelena's lips curved in a quiet smile. Afterward, the ceremony gave way to a luncheon in the adjacent hall. Tables were laden with seasonal delicacies, quiches studded with spinach, tarts of wild berries, and carafes of elderflower cordial. I moved among guests, exchanging congratulations. Julian pressed a pamphlet into my hand, plans for a new wing at the estate devoted to the performing arts. He gestured toward the blueprint. "My treat, for your next expansion." I blinked, overcome by both gratitude and surprise. "Thank you, Uncle. This will mean so much to our musicians." He nodded, that rare warmth shining through. "Your grandmother would be proud." After the luncheon, Henry guided me to a secluded balcony overlooking the cathedral gardens. The fellows mingled with donors, laughter drifting like petals on a breeze. He linked his arm through mine. "How do you feel?" Quote. I exhaled, the weight of emotion and joy settling. "Complete. I never imagined this vision could become reality so fully." He kissed my cheek. "And it's only the beginning." Back at the cottage, twilight wove shadows across the garden. I released the ceremony's tension with a glass of Prosecco on the terrace. Fireflies blinked around me, tiny sparks of promise. In the days that followed, momentum swelled. Julian undertook the Performing Arts Wing project, naming it in honor of my grandmother. Lucienne volunteered to curate exhibitions of the fellows' work at local galleries. Marisol organized mentorship sessions, her ties to the art community yielding new opportunities. The press coverage was glowing. Headlines lauded the cathedral dedication and the collaborative initiatives. Even skeptical commentators acknowledged the fellowship's integrity. At dusk one evening, I found myself at the reflection pool, where the spring had transformed into a fountain. The water's surface captured the first stars, each one a facet of dreams realized. Henry joined me, resting his hand on my shoulder. We stood in companionable silence, gazing at our reflection, two figures mapped against a sky of possibilities. "This," he said softly, "is your legacy." I turned to him, tears brimming. "No, it's ours." He smiled, brushing my hair from my face. "Together." As darkness fell and the world hushed, I felt the circle complete, beginning with an empty cathedral on my wedding day, and now this, filled seats, boundless hope, and a future that belonged to all who dared to believe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, expansions, audits, and the ever-shifting tides of family dynamics. But the foundation beneath my feet was stronger than any storm. I would continue to protect this inheritance, not as a barrier, but as an open gateway to creativity, compassion, and unity. And so, with renewed purpose, I stepped forward into the next chapter of our shared story. Winter's first snow fell soft and silent, dusting the hedgerows like powdered sugar. The journey from warm hearth to crisp night air felt exhilarating, as Henry and I returned to the cottage after a late evening meeting with the trustees of the Performing Arts Wing. Julian's project was moving forward swiftly, blueprints complete, contractors hired, and funding secured. The bones of the new wing would rest upon the foundation of my grandmother's vision, a tribute in stone and glass to artistic expression. Inside, the hearth glowed bright, casting dancing shadows across the parlor walls lined with paintings and photographs. I shed my coat, the previous excitement still humming in my veins. Henry poured 2 glasses of mulled wine, its spices perfuming the air. "To the Performing Arts Wing," he toasted, eyes glinting. "May it inspire countless voices." I clinked my glass to his. "And to all who believe in the power of creativity." I sipped the wine and gazed around the room, at the portraits of my grandmother, at the painting Henry and I created when we first moved in, at the collection of the fellows' works. Each piece told a story of struggle and triumph, of beginnings born from adversity. Our conversation turned to upcoming milestones: the grand opening of the Arts Wing in spring, the launch of the International Fellowship's 2nd cohort, and the donor retreat scheduled in the Scottish Highlands, a journey to my grandmother's birthplace. But amid triumphs, rumors fluttered through London's art circles. Whispers that our expansions had outpaced oversight, that funds had been misallocated, and that I'd grown distracted from my legal career. While the allegations held no evidence, the press's tilt toward sensationalism demanded a response. "I'll hold a press conference," I said, setting my glass on the mantel. "I'll present audited financials, showcase artist success stories, and answer questions transparently." Henry nodded approvingly. "You've handled every challenge with grace. This one will be no different." The following week, I stood before cameras and microphones in a grand ballroom at the Mayfair Club, flanked by Henry, Dorothy Reynolds, and the lead trustee. The crowd of journalists leaned forward as I laid out our audited statements, walked through the fellowship's positive impacts, and fielded probing questions with calm clarity. By the end, the room had shifted from skepticism to respect. Headlines the next day praised the Fairchild Foundation's integrity. Back at the cottage, I allowed myself a rare moment of private reflection. The weight of leadership was heavy, but I rested in the knowledge that every decision had been guided by loyalty and compassion. I traced the lines of a letter Julian had sent. He thanked me for navigating the controversies and reaffirmed family unity ahead of the Arts Wing opening. On a snowy morning, Henry and I prepared to depart for the Highlands. The carriage was packed with warm cloaks, sketch pads for the fellows, and framed prints of past scholarship works, gifts for the estate of my grandmother's childhood home. As we waved farewell to the cottage, I felt a surge of gratitude for the sanctuary we had built, and for the journey that had transformed loss into legacy. Through seasons of betrayal, reconciliation, expansion, and challenge, I had emerged not as a victim of absence, but as a champion of presence, present for those who believed in me, and present for the world's dreamers. And as the horses trotted away into the swirling snow, I whispered to Henry, "This inheritance is not mine alone. It belongs to every voice it amplifies." The Scottish Highlands unfolded like a painting beneath the carriage window, heather-clad hills undulating beneath a slate sky, ancient castles perched on crags, and locks shimmering like mirrors. Henry and I arrived at Glenhaven Manor, my grandmother's childhood home, greeted by a warm hearth and the scent of peat smoke. The housekeeper, Mrs. McAllister, ushered us inside, her kindly eyes tracing our footprints in the hall rug. "That room's been waiting for ye," she said, leading us to a parlor lined with worn leather armchairs and shelves of dusty tomes. Above the mantel hung a portrait of my grandmother as a young girl, her russet hair bright against the muted browns of her coat. I approached, my heart tight. She looked so small here, but so determined. Mrs. McAllister nodded. "Aye, Miss Isabel, she had a fire in her that day." Henry placed an arm around me. "She would be so proud of what you've done." I swallowed the lump in my throat and unfurled a rolled canvas, our painting of the cottage, placing it on the easel beside the portrait. Then I unwrapped framed prints of the fellow's works, arranging them around the room. A vibrant canvas by Asha lit one corner. A gilded frame held Miguel's violin etched in watercolor. Yelena's calligraphy flowed across another wall. When the trustees and scholars entered, their soft gasps filled the room. One by one, they admired the homage to Eleanor Fairchild's roots, transformed by the fruits of her legacy. I raised a glass of tart berries and toasted, "To our past and our future, bound together by art and purpose." The scholars echoed my words, their voices a chorus of gratitude. That evening, Henry and I strolled the grounds, the loch's glassy surface reflecting the pink afterglow of dusk. Kneeling by the water's edge, I placed a single white rose, a tribute to grandmother's memory. "Your vision has reached her home," Henry murmured. "This place, these people, they're part of your legacy now." I gazed at the rose drifting on the loch. It feels like coming full circle. But this is just one loop. The spiral continues. Back in the Manor's library that night, I drafted a letter to the University of Edinburgh, proposing a joint patronage program for their art department. I imagined lecture series, workshops, and student exchanges, a bridge between the Highlands and the rest of the world. As I sealed the envelope, the portrait caught my eye. In that silent gaze, I sensed approval and joy, a reminder that legacy is not static. It evolves through every act of generosity. The next morning, as I prepared to depart for London, Mrs. McAllister handed me a small leather-bound journal, my grandmother's childhood diary. "Your granny left this for you," she whispered. "Said you'd know what to do with it." My hands trembled as I opened the diary, finding scrawled entries about finding beauty in small things, helping neighbors, and dreaming of a world united by kindness. Tears welled as I realized the depth of her foresight. I closed the diary against my chest. I will honor it, always. With the journal in hand, Henry and I left Glenhaven, the Highlands fading into mist behind us. We returned to England, hearts brimming with renewed resolve. The world we'd built, rooted in drama, betrayal, and reconciliation, now stretched into horizons my grandmother had never imagined. Yet, guided by her words and fueled by our own journey, the Fairchild inheritance would continue to ignite creativity and compassion across generations. And so, as the wheels of the carriage turned toward home, I whispered a promise to the Highlands. "Your stories live on." The return to cottage life felt seamless. Our hearth welcomed us home like an old friend. Yet beneath the familiar rhythms, a new challenge awaited: the upcoming donor retreat in the Alps, where I was to present the fellowship's impact and unveil a bold proposal for a European artist residency program. Henry and I pored over itineraries and presentations, mindful that every detail, from mountain chalets to workshop schedules, reflected the Fairchild standard of excellence. At dawn, I settled at my desk with a cup of early tea and my grandmother's leather-bound journal. Flipping to her entries about community gatherings, I found inspiration for our retreat's guiding theme: artistic bridges. I drafted speeches weaving her words into our modern vision, artists crossing physical and cultural divides to create shared experiences. The journey to the Swiss Alps was long, the train snaking through valleys that unfolded like storybook scenes, turquoise lakes, pines dusted with last night's snow, jagged peaks reaching for the sky. At Zurich station, a convoy of cars awaited, conveying us to a chalet nestled on a mountainside beneath swaying pine boughs. The chalet was a marvel of rustic elegance. Stone walls warmed by a central hearth, floor-to-ceiling windows framing panoramic vistas, and workshops set aside for painting, composition, and readings. A gentle hush of anticipation filled the air as donors, trustees, and fellowship scholars arrived under crisp alpine sunlight. I greeted guests in the great hall, the smell of wood smoke mingling with fresh pine. Among the attendees were industry luminaries, a French theater director, a German curator, and a Spanish patron of the arts, each eager to see the fellowship's results and potential expansion. That evening, under a canopy of stars, I delivered the keynote beneath a projector screen showing highlights reels, Asha unveiling murals in Mumbai, Miguel performing in Sao Paulo's historic theaters, and Amira's sculptures showcased in Cairo courtyards. My grandmother's words echoed, "Let art be our common language," resonating through the silent crowd. Applause warmed my cheeks as donors approached, pledging support for the European residency program. Julian, seated beside me, whispered, "They're impressed." I smiled, relief and pride swirling within me. The retreat's workshops followed, painting classes on a sun-drenched balcony, chamber music recitals echoing off stone walls, and storytelling sessions around the hearth. I joined scholars in hands-on sessions, rediscovering the joy of creation absent legal briefs. One afternoon, I found myself alongside Clara Thompson, reading excerpts from her new novel inspired by the retreat's collaborative spirit. The words danced through the alpine air, weaving a narrative of unity. As the retreat drew to a close, we hiked to a cliffside overlooking a crystalline lake. There, I unveiled the European residency plan. 5 artists per year would be hosted in a network of historic estates across Europe, fostering cross-cultural dialogues and creative synergy. The donors' enthusiastic nods and swift commitments sealed the program's launch. On our journey back home, the train chugged through tunnels, emerging into golden fields. Henry took my hand. "You did it again," he said softly. I rested my head on his shoulder. "We did." Back at the cottage, the saplings in the garden showed signs of spring growth, mirroring the fellowship's flourishing. Yet, as I lit the fire that night, I sensed the next challenge, keeping the momentum alive, balancing global vision with local roots. I opened my grandmother's journal once more, her script still clear. True legacy lives in hearts, not vaults. Closing the book, I whispered, "Then let's keep their hearts aflame." Tomorrow, I would begin drafting plans for the fellowship's digital platform, an online hub connecting scholars and alumni worldwide. The inheritance I'd once wielded as a sword had become a bridge across continents, uniting artists in a tapestry of shared stories and endless possibilities. And as the hearth's glow illuminated the cottage walls, I felt ready to guide this legacy toward horizons my grandmother had only begun to imagine. The dawn sun cast long shadows across the cottage as I settled into my study, the scent of fresh parchment drifting from the desk. Today's mission: draft the proposal for the fellowship's digital platform, an online nexus for artists, supporters, and alumni. In my mind's eye, I saw virtual galleries where Asha's murals could inspire a designer in Tokyo, live-streamed recitals by Miguel reaching audiences in Buenos Aires, and forums where Yelena's narratives could shape global conversations. I opened my grandmother's journal, seeking her guiding principles. One entry caught my eye: embrace the future but honor the past. I took my grandmother's pen, a gift Henry had found in an antique shop, and inscribed the platform's mission statement in her steady script. The Fairchild Online Creative Commons shall serve as a bridge across cultures, a digital hearth where artists ignite the sparks of imagination in hearts worldwide. With that as the cornerstone, I outlined key elements: user-curated virtual galleries, live-streamed performances, mentorship chat rooms, and archival repositories of fellowship works. A calendar feature would schedule webinars and Q&A sessions with mentors. A robust moderation policy, borrowed from Dorothy's legal wisdom, would safeguard integrity and respect. By midday, Henry joined me with lunch, quiche Lorraine, and a crisp salad. We reviewed the draft together, tweaking phrasing and adding notes on branding. "This is transformative," he said, eyes alight. "It'll propel the fellowship into a global community." I nodded, energized by the thought. Let's pilot it with our existing fellows, then roll it out to the public next quarter. After lunch, I sent the proposal to our web development team and arranged a virtual meeting for the afternoon. While I waited, I ventured into the garden, where spring blooms kissed the morning light. Tulips danced in the breeze, and the early roses opened their petals, as if heralding a new era. In the afternoon, the developers joined via video link. I presented the proposal, screen-sharing wireframes of the platform's interface. They asked precise questions about functionality, security, and user experience. I provided clear answers, confident in the vision's solidity. As the meeting concluded, one developer said, "This is more than a platform, it's a community." I smiled, gratitude filling me. Exactly, that's our goal. Later that evening, as Henry and I dined by candlelight, my phone buzzed with an email from Dorothy, the codicil update for the Digital Ventures governance structure, ensuring that the platform adhered to Fairchild values of transparency and compassion. Her prompt response eased my mind. "Everything is in place," I said, toasting Henry with a glass of Riesling. "We're ready." He grinned. "To breaking new ground." I clinked glasses, savoring the spark of excitement. Tomorrow we would begin coding, but tonight I relished the sense of momentum, the knowledge that an inheritance once wielded as retribution had become a wellspring of creation. As the candles flickered and the night deepened, I allowed myself to drift into dreams, not of battles fought, but of canvases yet to be painted, symphonies yet to be composed, and stories yet to be told in the vast digital hearth we'd soon light for the world. The first lines of code glowed on the screen in my study as I settled in to oversee the development of the Fairchild Online Creative Commons. Henry had already coordinated with the developers, and now it was time for me to dive into content strategy, drafting guidelines for user submissions, curating the platform's front page, and planning launch events. The click of keys echoed in the hushed room as the winter wind rattled the window panes. With each paragraph of policy I wrote, I felt the legacy expand from stone walls and canvas into digital space. I drafted a welcome message for the scholars. Welcome to the Creative Commons, a space forged from Eleanor Fairchild's vision, where every brushstroke, note, and word finds its place in a tapestry of global creativity. Satisfied, I turned to the schedule for virtual launch panels. Invitations had gone out to keynote speakers, a world-renowned novelist, a celebrated conductor, and a pioneering digital artist. The countdown to the public beta launch read, 7 days. I leaned back and allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey from discarded bride to steward of an inheritance that spanned centuries felt surreal. Every challenge had refined me. Betrayal had become determination. Exclusion had forged empathy, and inheritance had transformed into opportunity. A chime signaled an incoming video call. It was Marisol, her face glowing on the screen. "Isabel, we have a problem." Alarmed, I sat forward. "What is it?" She hesitated, eyes intense. "One of the fellows, Amira, her visa application was denied. They're questioning her background, and unless we act fast, she won't be able to participate in the digital launch panel." My pulse quickened. That can't happen. Amira's talent, her voice, must be heard. Marisol's voice trembled. "She's in legal limbo. Her departure date is 2 days before launch. If we can't resolve this, the platform will go live without her, and we'll lose credibility." I pressed my lips together, mind racing through options, legal appeals, diplomatic contacts, even emergency scholarships to cover relocation. Each possibility carried time-sensitive hurdles. "Get me her case file," I said. "We'll mobilize resources and fight this. No one gets left behind." She nodded, relief flooding her features. "Thank you, Isabel. I knew you'd know what to do." I ended the call and stared at the screen, determination hardening in my chest. The platform's success mattered, but its integrity, its promise of inclusivity, mattered more. I opened my grandmother's journal once again, fingers tracing the inked words. "Justice is the guardian of dreams." I would honor that creed. As I drafted emergency legal briefs and coordination emails to sanctuary agencies, the first flakes of snow drifted past the window. The world outside turned white and silent, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new colors. The clock ticked toward midnight. I paused, eyes on the journal's worn cover. Tomorrow would demand every ounce of resolve I possessed, and the outcome would shape the fellowship's future. I whispered into the quiet night. Not on my watch, Amira. Not on my watch. And with that oath lingering in the air, I returned to the case file. The first crack of dawn revealed a pale pink sky as I surveyed the morning's task list. Finalize Amira's visa, oversee the digital platform's beta launch, attend a donor breakfast, and deliver closing remarks at the press event. It was a carousel of deadlines, each demanding unwavering focus. Yet beneath the rush, I felt an extraordinary sense of purpose. This journey, from the hollow echo of an empty cathedral to this crescendo of creativity, had brought me here, at the helm of a living legacy. Despite my confidence, anxiety stirred as I opened my inbox. A new message from the Home Office confirmed that Amira's appeal had succeeded, a miracle wrought by precise legal arguments and heartfelt advocacy. Relief washed over me. I sent a breathless message to Marisol and replied to Amira, "Welcome to the Creative Commons. Can't wait to hear you." Henry joined me in the study, slipping a cup of Earl Grey into my hand. "She's in?" I smiled, tears pricking. "Yes, she's in." He exhaled, pride lighting his eyes. "Then let's get to work." By mid-morning, the digital platform went live. The Fairchild Online Creative Commons homepage appeared on screens worldwide, a mosaic of artwork, upcoming live streams, and a banner proclaiming, quote, "Beta launch, join us live." I clicked the Take the Tour button, each feature loading flawlessly. The virtual gallery lobby, the mentorship chat, the event calendar showcasing panel discussions, and Amira's opening address. As user counts ticked upward, I watched real-time comments appear, messages of excitement, gratitude, and anticipation. A scholar in Tokyo marveled at the connectivity. A patron in New York praised the vision. A student in Nairobi said the platform was game-changing. Each ping reminded me of the countless voices now woven into the tapestry we'd created. At a donor breakfast later, I spoke of this success, the scholars' arrivals, the platform's debut, and the promise of inclusivity. Glasses clinked, and donations poured in to fund platform enhancements. Julian, seated beside me, nodded approvingly. "You've built something enduring." I caught his eye and offered a rare grin. We all did. That afternoon, Amira took to the launch panel live stream, a poised, articulate presence as she described her sculpture journey, her narrative capturing viewers' hearts. I watched from studios in the cottage, Henry beside me, monitors serving as windows, to a world touched by our grandmother's vision. As dusk settled, I wandered to the garden, where winter's final frost glistened on rose petals. Henry joined me, the soft glow of the cottage windows behind him. We stood in silence, absorbing the moment, the legacy realized, the journey complete. I wrapped my arms around his waist. "Thank you, for believing, for supporting, for standing by me." He held me tight. "Thank you, for leading us with heart and strength." In that embrace, I felt the circle close, and the horizon expand. The inheritance I had once wielded as both shield and sword had become a beacon, a living testament to loyalty, compassion, and the power of art to unite us. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.